You don't have to be a Guyanese to be concerned about the border dispute between Guyana and Venezuela, which seems to be all about oil. We'll be discussing that in this program and the implications for so many, whether you live in Guyana or in the United States. Later, Bukola Olode will talk about what thousands of people are suffering from now, seasonal affective disorder. But we begin with what will have a ripple effects across the Caribbean and even beyond the Caribbean to right here in the United States. Dr. Ivelaw Griffith, welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Let's talk about the importance to Brooklyn and why is this important to so many of our viewers?
One of the realities of the Caribbean, and in this case of Guyana, is that there is a significant diaspora of our countries. And there is a significant number of Guyanese in the diaspora in Brooklyn. And therefore, things happening on the home front, whether it's in the Essequibo part of Guyana or the Demerara part of Guyana or the Burmese part of Guyana, would naturally be of interest to people of Guyanese extraction and people who are sociologically Guyanese, but not necessarily born in Guyana. My wife is St. Lucian by birth, but I describe her as being sociologically Guyanese. So the significance of the issue and the preponderance of Guyanese and Guyanese descent people in Brooklyn means that this matter will of necessity give importance to folks in Brooklyn.
Oil and bullyism. Is this what the dispute is all about?
It's about oil and bullyism, but much more than oil and bullyism. I did a 3-part series on oil and bullyism for Oil Now, picked up by other sources. And among other things, I explain in that series that the bullyism goes back to the 1960s on the part of Venezuela, long before the discovery in 2015 of the oil. Now, the oil discovery in 2015 has ratcheted up the bullyism, has allowed Venezuela to take their pursuit of the land to the next levels. But this controversy goes back to 1899. Actually, it goes back to 1841, but was settled in 1899 with an arbitration held in Paris. Britain, the colonial possessor of Guyana at the time, and Venezuela were in dispute. The arbitration panel said, here is where the borders should be. And the borders were not only established for Guyana, Venezuela, but given where Brazil is, that 1899 agreement was used as a basis to set the trijunction, the place where Venezuela and Guyana and Brazil meet. So there's a long history of this dispute, and the dispute became accentuated since 2015 with the advent of the massive discovery. I like to tell people, Sam, that Venezuela's claim is an existential claim. And by that, I mean it is of such significance in quantum and impact that were you to remove Venezuela, were you to remove Essequibo from Guyana, you're talking about next to nothing. And I'll give you an indication of what I mean. Venezuela's claim for the Essequibo is 61,600 square miles. That Essequibo is 74% of Guyana's territory. I sometimes like to say that you get a sense of the size of Essequibo if you do some comparative geographic references. And here's one geographic reference of use. The island of Jamaica can fit into the Essequibo 14 and a half times. Britain, England, the island of England can fit into the Essequibo and pieces left over. Belgium can fit into Essequibo 4 times. If you want to ask about Barbados, I don't want to guess, you to guess, Sam, Barbados can fit into the Essequibo 371 times. So we're talking about a massive territory. But it is not simply the size of the territory that is of value, of importance, that is existential. It's the people. Almost 200,000 Guyanese are in the Essequibo of the 800,000. It's the resources. In the Essequibo, there is gold, there is diamond, there is uranium, there is bauxite, there is offshore oil as well as onshore oil. There is manganese, rich agricultural lands. The Essequibo is part of the Guyana Shield, fantastic biodiversity, species of all kinds. So we're talking about an existential threat. Massive land, deep resources, significant amount of people living there.
And the population of Guyana is not that large, even compared to Barbados, and certainly not compared to Jamaica.
Yes. Guyana has only about 800,000 people. One of the countries in the Americas with a low population density, but also has the advantage of having significant resources in that swath of land. And it is a combination of the size of the land and the significant number of resources in the land that makes this an existential matter for Guyana. If you were to take away Guyana's Essequibo, you know what? How much territory is left? Just about 22,000 square miles. Yes.
Which is still a significant amount of territory.
Significant amount of territory, but when you consider the fact that the resource base
is Essequibo,
significantly in the Essequibo,
yes,
you're talking about an impoverished slice of land left in your. But it becomes even more complicated, Sam, because not only is Guyana facing a claim from the west from Venezuela, Guyana also is facing a claim from the east from Suriname. You may or may not know that there's a territorial dispute between Guyana and Suriname that is still unresolved, called the New River Triangle. 15,000 square kilometers. And Venezuela used to publish maps of Guyana showing Guyana without the Essequibo and Guyana without the New River Triangle. And it's a hilarious representation. They're trying to emasculate Guyana by saying, here is what you would be when we take back our Essequibo and when the Surinamese take back their New River Triangle. So we've got some serious issues facing Guyana and Guyanese folks.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to have a ripple effect throughout the Caribbean, in fact, throughout the Western world, the Eastern world too, because we keep hearing about what is going on in Russia and the Ukraine.
Yeah. And the connectivity to Russia is right there in the sense that Russia has been one of the strong partners of Venezuela for a long time. Significant investment in Venezuelan oil industry, significant investment in their military establishment. 2 years ago, Venezuela bought a significant number of jets from Russia. And so some of the domino, the ripple effects, to use your terms, are not only continental, but international. One of the investors in Guyana's petroleum pursuits is China. You know, that massive discovery in 2015 was done by a consortium three major partners in that consortium: ExxonMobil, Hess, and Sinopec, a Chinese company. Earlier this year, a couple of months ago, Chevron bought out the Hess component of the partnership. And so it's not only the United States that has an economic interest, geopolitical interest in the Essequibo. The Chinese have an interest. The British have an interest. The French have an interest. And so there are multiple dimensions, multiple potential ripple effects involved in this issue. Caribbean, of course. I was telling some colleagues in another interview just a few minutes ago that any annexation by Venezuela of the Essequibo will trigger the Regional Security System Treaty provision for mutual assistance. You know, the RSS, Regional Security System, is headquartered in Barbados. Guyana joined the RSS last year. And the RSS treaty has a provision under Article 4 for mutual assistance. You attack one, you attack all. Yes, the RSS forces are small, but it will be triggered. That treaty provision for mutual assistance will be triggered if any incursion has happened. So Bajan folks are going to be involved. St. Lucian folks are going to be involved. Dominican forces, Antiguan, all the RSS countries will be obliged because of their treaty obligations to come to Guyana's assistance.
I understand that there is a significant migration issue with Bolivia, people from Bolivia coming into Guyana. What are the real facts about this and the immigration issue?
The migration issue, as I know it, is not a significant flow of people from Bolivia to Guyana. There's a significant flow of economic and political refugees from Venezuela into Guyana. One of the harsh realities of the geography of that part of the South American continent is that there are no physical barriers except rivers and mountains. And so people flow relatively easily across the rivers, whether it's the Mazaruni or the Cuyuni, out of Venezuela, out of Brazil, you can walk across rivers. Some of them are just minimal flows in certain times of the year. And quite interestingly, the immigrants, the migrants, refugees are not only in the interior part of Guyana. Some of them are making their way down to the Atlantic coast, to Georgetown, to the West Bank, to the East Bank. And it's not only a headache for the government to manage, it's also causing a lot of social dysfunctionality. You can imagine there are certain social economic practices which are not considered helpful to society, where female migrants ply their trade. That is causing issue. Upsurge in crime by the migrants, creating havoc. So the migration factor is a factor of importance. And I speculated in, I think it was part 3 of that series I did for All Now, that I don't believe that Maduro and his folks planned for this migration factor as a Trojan horse. But I can well see them thinking that we've got a lot of Venezuelans in the Essequibo now. We might very well be able to rely upon them to facilitate whatever we want to do in that area. My people in what I consider to be my land, let me get them. Especially in the context of Maduro's announced intention, when he takes the Essequibo, he's going to give citizenship to everyone in the Essequibo, and he's going to give identity cards and has an accelerated social program, benefits for them. So that is something that must be of concern to the Guyanese authorities, the migrant flows. And in the absence of physical barriers, except the mountains and the rivers, it is hard to police and to manage that migrant flow.
People are going to be asking the question, who is this Maduro?
Nicolas Maduro has been the president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela for almost 10 years now. He succeeded the late Hugo Chavez, who died of cancer in 2013. Hugo Chavez, very popular, came to power by virtue of a revolution, left-leaning. And quite interestingly, during the time of Chavez's rule, he was not as bullish on the Essequibo as Maduro is. I still remember the visit he made to Georgetown, Hugo Chavez, in 2014, where he said, let's not accentuate the Essequibo. That's not an issue we want to talk too much about. But then when Maduro came aboard, for his own domestic political reasons, and especially now that the oil has been flowing, Guyana now has known reserves of 11 billion barrels of oil. Guyana is going to be projected to be the fourth largest per capita oil producer in the world. Now that the oil has begun to flow and the reserves of significance have been determined to be there, he is pushing the envelope, pushing the bullyism, pushing to see if he can get the Essequibo back to his place, as he said, it was taken by the British.
Yes. Yeah. We've got about 30 seconds left. Tell us in 30 seconds about your book and where we can get a copy of your book once it is published.
I got a book called Challenge Sovereignty. It's a book I started writing in 2011. It came out of the Eric Williams Memorial Lecture that I delivered at Florida International University. I had been at FIU for more than a decade as a dean and a professor. And I started writing that book, and the book looks at the impact of drugs, crime, terrorism, and cyber threats on the region. And I'd love to come back when it's out in early February. But it's available through Amazon. It's available right now with pre-publication marketing. It's available at 30% discount. And it's a good Christmas gift to give, Sam.
Okay.
All right.
I will see if you give me a copy of that. If not, I'll go and pick up one for myself. Dr. Ivelaw Griffith, thank you so much for being on Brooklyn 45 and sharing all this information for all of the Caribbean and African American people who live here in the United States.
Thanks for having me.
It's that time of year when you or people you know suffer from what is called seasonal affective disorder. Bukola Olode, welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you.
What is this thing called seasonal affective disorder?
So seasonal affective disorder, also known as SAD, is a type of depression that is related to changes in seasons. It usually begins and ends around the same time every year, and is often characterized by a seasonal pattern with symptoms lasting for about 4 to 5 months. The symptoms usually resolve during the spring and summer months, and less often, SAD causes depression in the spring or early summer and resolves during the fall or winter. However, it's mostly common in the beginning of the fall months going into the winter months. And it usually affects about 5% of the population in the United States, usually affects more women than men, and the symptoms usually starts between the ages of 18 to 30 years old. And like I said earlier, it happens for about 4 to 5 months in the year, depending when the seasons start to change.
Well, I'm no longer 30 years old. Would I be affected by this seasonal affective disorder?
Yes, you could be affected by this seasonal affective disorder. However, for people who are older, many people already have an idea of this symptoms, the symptoms that this seasonal affective disorder causes. And sometimes they tend to be more proactive in terms of dealing with the issue as well. But yes, older adults can be affected by seasonal affective disorder as well.
The acronym is SAD. Well, that's sad. Are people sad when they are affected by this seasonal affective disorder?
Yes. So what happens is that the symptoms usually, as like you said, sad. People begin to feel sad when the seasons change. When we have shorter days and longer nights, they feel sad or having a depressed mood for most of the day. Sometimes people tend to lose interest in activities that they once enjoyed. Many times people report low energy, excessive sleep. Sometimes changes in their appetite. Usually people tend to eat more and crave more carbohydrates. And people may have difficulty concentrating and, of course, gain weight during this time as well. There are more serious symptoms, however, that includes feeling hopeless or feeling guilty or sometimes having suicidal ideations or thoughts. So those are more serious symptoms of this SAD, seasonal affective disorder.
Those are serious symptoms. Wow. Now, can it be prevented? I know you talked about some of the things that we have to do, but how can we prevent being a victim of this seasonal affective disorder?
So for those who already have a diagnosis of depression, it is good to actually talk to their healthcare provider even before the seasons change to make sure that they have, they're in treatment year round, not just during the winter months. So, to be proactive about it. And for those who have noticed that during this time, their mood changes, what they can do is talk to their healthcare provider. There are certain things that might be able to help, like light therapy. The healthcare provider might recommend some kind of lights, at the early hours of the day with some light exposure. But we recommend that this is done under the guidance of a healthcare provider. Also, the healthcare provider might also do a blood test to check the levels of vitamin D, because if vitamin D levels are low, it could also lead to, the reduced serotonin in the body, which affects the mood. So these are things that you can do even before the season changes, to talk to your healthcare provider to discuss preventative measures. And then also other things that can be done is intentionally going outside. Even when it's cold outside, going outside to get the little sunlight that you have, being exposed to light, exercising, and, try not to isolate oneself just because it's the winter month, to try to enjoy, to do activities that once enjoyed, not to try to isolate oneself by, staying away from people and things that you usually would have done even when before the season changed. So these are ways that you could actually prevent, of course, the less serious symptoms of seasonal affective disorder.
I take vitamin D3 every morning. Is that advisable?
If I'm not a doctor, however, if you're taking it under the guidance of your healthcare professional and your healthcare professional says it's something that works for you, then that would be a great idea. Yes.
Now, you said you're not a doctor, and what are you? I know you're a therapist. What kind of therapist are you?
Psychotherapist. So I'm a licensed social worker with a growing psychotherapy practice, and a life coach as well. Yes.
What resources are there in Brooklyn that can help with this disorder?
We usually tell people to always start with your healthcare provider, because your healthcare provider knows you the best, knows your history, knows everything about you. It's usually best to start with a healthcare provider. And then there's also 311. You can also reach out to 311 for resources for therapists, for medical, if you need to see a medical practitioner and you don't have a medical provider, you can reach out to 311 for providers based on everyone's zip code. So that would be a good resource as well.
What organization are you associated with? I think you are in private practice. What is that?
Yes, so I am a licensed social worker, like I said, and I'm working with an organization called Amira for Her. in the group practice. I'm one of the therapists in the group practice. So as part of my work, I work with individuals. And in terms of educating individuals of building healthy relationships, providing resources to people affected by domestic violence, and also people who've been affected by trauma, people who have issues with career choices and, life transitions generally. So I would be somebody that would provide support as people are trying to transition in life and make better choices, with their lives. So they would reach out to me and I'll support them in that growth.
How do people reach out to you? You have a website?
Yes, I can be reached out. I can be reached at bukolawolodetherapist@gmail.com. They can reach out to me on that by email.
Okay. Have you yourself ever been affected by this seasonal affective disorder?
You know what? That's very interesting that you asked that question, because before I even knew about it, when I immigrated to the United States, I noticed that, towards a certain time of the year was like everything was kind of gloomy before I understood what it was. So just like I've said earlier, and I take very proactive measures to get out, even when it's cold. During my lunch breaks, I try to take a walk. I try to get some exercise in. I try to connect with people, so that, I don't fall into that rut of, being gloomy and moody throughout the day. So yes, I think most people can say at one time or the other, they have been affected by this seasonal affective disorder. Yes.
Bukola Olode, thank you very much for being on Brooklyn 45 and sharing that information with us. And I'll talk to my doctor about this D3, because I have been told that D3 helps in the absence of sunlight. But again, thank you very much for being our guest on Brooklyn 45. And we all know how to get in touch with you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Bukola Olode. And thank you, Dr. Ivelaw Griffith. And to you, our viewers, we thank you for watching this program. And we invite you, as we always do, to partner with us here at Brooklyn 45. Visit our website and learn more about us. Please tell your family and friends and colleagues to watch our Brooklyn 45 program and to watch us on cable television and on YouTube. On behalf of our Brooklyn 45 team, I am Sam Taitt.
Brooklyn 45 is a 501c3 not-for-profit, and we welcome your support. Check out our website, brooklyn45.com, and feel free to donate or share it with your friends and family. Have any comments or questions? Send them to our Facebook, facebook.com/Brooklyn45TV. If you have any questions or topics you think we should cover next, shoot me an email over at brooklyn45tv@gmail.com. Thank you again for watching.